welcome to CGTN. This is a special coverage on China's annual political season. I'm Pendeng in Beijing.
And I'm Wang Yang. Political advisors are wrapping up their annual session at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing today. Members of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, or the CPPCC, are expected to deliberate and pass key resolutions. The chairman of the CPPCC National Committee, Wang Yang, will deliver a speech.
And during the week-long session, some 2,000 national political advisors of the CPPCC from more than 30 sectors, including people's organizations and ethnic minority groups, held discussions on topics concerning China's development.
That's right. And before the meeting begins, CPPCC members will take questions from the media on key issues. We'll be bringing you live coverage of that, and we'll be live streaming the coverage on our social media platforms, or log on to the CGTN app for updates.
And the CPPCC's Members Corridor press event is expected to start shortly. Journalists can speak directly to political advisors. Our reporter Sun Ye has more on that.
This is the last day of this year's CPPCC session, and after 6 days of deliberations, discussions, and a lot of headlines making, there is more to expect today. Now, here I am at the news hall of the Great Hall of the People, and in the morning there will be one more session of those members' corridor session, where a few CPPCC members will be taking questions from the press on issues of the nation's most concern, and some members will be taking this opportunity to make the biggest announcements in their field of expertise. Now, during one of those sessions, China's chief designer for the nation's manned space program, Zhou Jianping, he revealed that by the end of this year, China's space station will be completed and 6 Chinese taikonauts will be meeting in orbit in space. That's the kind of headlines coming out of such corridor sessions. And of course, some CPPCC members also make their most vocal suggestions here. And among the most frequently made suggestions include those that concern China's transition and change to an age-friendly society, and how does it ensure that the elderly population will have a quality time. And another key topic also relevant, how does China's labor force change and adjust to the changing economy and also the changing population landscape. Among the suggestions also made here from the corridors, some CPPCC members have suggested changing job requirement, including lifting off some of the age limits for certain positions. Now, those suggestions could be received and perhaps implemented in the following year, but at least today we will be hearing the consensus coming from the CPPCC members and what has come out of this edition of the CPPCC session, coming from a speech by Wang Yang, CPPCC National Committee Chairman. And his speech will be delivered later this morning, again here at the Great Hall of the People. Sun Ye, CGTN at the Great Hall of the People.
So one buzzword in this year's session is the term whole process people's democracy. It has been heard many times at this year's 2 sessions. And China's annual political season is essentially set to practice democracy, to make decisions in accordance with the interests of the great majority of the country's people. So we are going to begin our discussion with the topic of whole process people's democracy.
Indeed, and for more on that, we're joined in the studio by Professor Xia Lu from Renmin University of China and Mr. Ina Tangen, independent political and economic affairs commentator. Thank you very much for joining us, gentlemen. Professor Xia, so here we've got the term whole process people's democracy, and for almost a week we've been witnessing Chinese democracy in action. We have 2 institutions really in this process. One is the National People's Congress and one is the CPPCC, Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. How are they functioning in this whole process?
Yes, thank you for the question. The whole process, people's democracy, actually combines the direct and indirect democracy, and combines the actual democracy and the procedural democracy. So it does not only involve the campaign or election or other kind of, that kind of thing. It also involves oversight, involves consultation, and involves those kind of managing and running the country. So it is a whole process kind of democracy, and it is a dynamic mechanism, not only a kind of a thing in the voting. So that will become hibernated kind of a political election. Okay, so that's my take.
Yeah. So we know that the CPPCC is not a body of state power, or nor does it have law-making decision, law-making or policy-making organ. But if we look at it, how does it reflect China's developing democracy? The term "whole process people's democracy." How does it really put things into practice?
Well, democracy is about the will of the people and ensuring it. And if to do that, you really need to talk to the people. You know, in the U.S. and other places, politicians tend to be very wealthy people. They're very much removed. They're not housewives. They're not, common laborers, farmers, et cetera, et cetera. Their full-time job is to be political and to get political support, and that involves a lot of money. There is no such consideration if you're a part of either body. This is not money making. You do this in addition to your other work. And it's a privilege and honor. You're there to put a check on the governing process. From the NPC, it's about checking the legislation, making sure that it is in fact doing what it's supposed to. I mean, literally, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, making sure that what is intended is in fact going to be there. Now the consultative, people should think of that maybe perhaps a little bit like the House of Lords, but instead of being an anachronistic thing that involves hereditary, what this is really an ability to talk not only to the people but to experts. There are so many retired people from business, active people from business, also from government, and their voices in terms of respecting wisdom, bringing forth this idea about, well, we tried that in the past, institutional history. This is very, very important to any process, and unfortunately you don't see enough of that today in a lot of the things. Like in South Korea, I mean, it seems to be all about the personalities, not the policies, and I think that's the exact opposite in China. It's always about the policy.
Right, having said that, Professor, what do you make of the representation at the CPPCC, especially at this national event?
Yes, that's the kind of the essence of this institutional design. So we notice that it does not involve the kind of the provincial regional. So all the representatives are coming from different targeted constituencies.
You mean members of the
members
CPPCC?
Designated. They are designated constituency. They represented some kind of the minor political party, the democratic parties. They represent some kind of the minor ethnic groups, and they even represent some certain, let's say, the so-called the mass organization. Let's say the Women Federation and other kind of the Youth Federation. Yeah. So it does not involve the regional balance. It does not. It does not talk about the regional balance or regional inequality. It talks about the whole development and the different interests in different, let's say, the constituencies. So that's the essence of this institutional design, and it can combine or it can complement with the NPC in the decision making. Or although the resolutions of the CPPCC, they're not laws, they're not regulation. They do kind of reflect the people's will in this kind of process.
Well, some in the West tend to think that the CPPCC as the top advisory body is sometimes underappreciated. Do you think that's the case, Mr. Tangen?
Well, in the West, they don't understand it. So, I mean, obviously, you put aside anything you don't understand. They don't understand China's whole process, democracy, and how China delivers its system of government. So, because it's alien, they kind of dismiss it, and that's unfortunate. Often you hear this thing, oh, it's just a rubber stamp, nothing happens there. Well, they're equating China's process with their own process, where there's a lot of debate about issues that have not been thoroughly studied. I mean, the difference, and I've written books on Chinese governance and things like that. The amount of time it takes for a policy to be introduced and then taken down to the grassroots level, literally down to the local village level and below district levels, and then all the way up to the top. It then has to be harmonized with all the other laws. You don't have that in typical democracies. They simply, somebody gets a good idea, maybe they have experience, maybe they have none, maybe they've been in politics only for 9 months, and all of a sudden they're in charge of trying to make sweeping changes or harmonize policies that are very, very difficult. So it's a different kind of process. It's not that everyone should embrace China's, but you should understand it and what advantages it's giving to China. 40 years of steady progress cannot be argued with. You should be learning from it, not just disparaging it.
Yeah, And the CPPCC members, these advisors are the best and brightest in their own fields.
Right.
You know, they work through the plenary sessions and they go out in the field to study, to propose their very detailed suggestions to the government. So how do their ideas really transform into actionable proposals?
Well, there is a mechanism or dynamism in China called the mass line. And this mass line, just like Mr. Tangen said, that all the policy will, all the policy initiation just proposed by these members or deputies, and then this will, this kind of so-called draft will come down to the different region or from the county level or even the village level, and the people will discuss this kind of thing, whether they really feel, whether they really understand the essence, and whether they can, come up with another kind of improvement in the proposal. And this proposal, the draft, get back to the so-called platform plenary session, and they update, and then come down to the village level. And so this whole process just not only involves the elite proposal, but also involves the ordinary people's consideration, the ordinary people's particular interest in this thing. So this represented the whole, let's say, as many people as possible. So it becomes a democracy that works for China and works in China. It fits to the China's kind of condition. So this is the situation.
Mr. Tangen, you've been in China for quite a long time. Have you met some political advisors in your daily life, and tell us more about their daily work, if you will?
Well, actually, I have met quite a few over the years, and I can tell you, it is so different. I was involved in the American political system. Once you're in the political system, it's full time. You're either trying to propose legislation, get other people to vote with you, or you're trying to raise money in order to get reelected. Those are not considerations here. It's purely about policy. So, for instance, I knew people from the Women's Federation, and they were talking about poverty alleviation, it's particularly as it affects women. And they said, look, we have these ideas, we've tried them, and we want to take them out to a national level to see if they can work on that basis. So they'll step up and they say, look, we tried this here, it seems to be working, we want to have a closer examination of this and perhaps bring it into the national spotlight as a program that will be supported by the government. So these are the types of things. I met somebody who was very active in Hong Kong. She personally had brought tens of thousands of children at her own expense to Beijing so that they could learn about China, because unfortunately people don't understand that many people in Hong Kong really know nothing, and even in many cases have not been to the mainland. So this separation there, she thought this would be for her troubles. All the businesses associated with her were burnt down during these riots. So this is not something where you're trying to build power or influence. This is not lobbying. If you're bringing something forth, it's because you are interested in it, because it's part of the constituency you're taking on, and it's not a full-time job. It is just something you're doing for your country.
So during this process, how they carry out their CPPCC advisory duties, how do these members, through their work, reflect the people's right to know and also the people's responsibility to oversee?
Well, most of the members of the CPPCC, they are kind of the part-time job, and they have their particular position, they have their particular occupation. Some of them are professors, some of them are professionals, some of them are even, let's say, the front line, the first line workers and those kind of other workers. So they know what's the situation in their specialized area, and they know what this kind of their colleagues need, and they can bring the real needs or the real aspiration of the people to this kind of political session, and to talk about it, and to let the elite know, let the decision maker know the real situation, so that the decision will not too much superficial or too much, let's say, abstract. So this policy and this kind of policy making process can combine the people's will, ordinary people's real will in the process.
And in addition to that, there's also these inspections. What you do is you get groups of professionals in different areas, and they will go to different places, and they'll see what's actually happening there. What they're interested in is models that are working. And I can't stress this enough. China has done well because it does on a small way. They study something as it's actually working, and then they decide, well, how can it be refined? And then once it seems to be in a good position, they start bringing it up, start pushing it out to other places regionally and then eventually nationally. So this process ties into this, and this is when you start talking about whole process democracy. Yeah. It's not just
Since we've been talking
talk.
about political advisors' work, let's cross live to the great hall of the people and meet them directly, because this members corridor, members of the CPPCC, are going to meet the press very soon, and this is a very good opportunity.
欢迎大家来到委员通道采访。我们在人民大会堂现场邀请部分全国政协委员回答大家的关心的问题。下面，请大家每个记者朋友只提一个问题，提问前请
One question
先自报
from
家门。
each media friend, and please identify yourself before posing questions. Okay, the first CPPCC member.
请3位委员做自我介绍。
Three members, please introduce yourselves to our media friends.
我是全国政协委员金鹏辉，
I'm Jin Penghui,
来自人民银行上海分部。
CPPCC member, and I'm from the Shanghai head office of the People's Bank of China.
全国政协委员武刚，
I'm
来
Wu
自
Gang,
金丰科技股份有限公司。
CPPCC member from the Goldwind Science and Technology Company. I'm Lin Fanru from Xiangyu Industry Group.
现在开始提问。
Okay,
请
questions
举
please.
手示意。请北区第2排中间那位记者提问。
谢谢主持人，我
Thank
是
you.
新华社新华网记者。
With
我有
Xinhua
问题
News.
提给金鹏辉委员。
I have a question for Mr.
2021
Jin
年，
Penghui.
我国生态
In
文明建设进入
2021,
了以降碳
we
为
have
重点战略
entered
方向的新
a
阶段。
new era to
双碳目标下
lower
绿色
our
金融
carbon
总
emission,
设计日趋完善。
and
请
we
问
have
金委
better
员，
top
央行在服务降碳方面
design
有哪些举措？
regarding green finance. So I want to know what are the PBOC's tools to help our traditional companies to realize their transformation and transition. Thank you.
应该说，服务降碳，央行
Lower
一直在行动。
our carbon emission has been a part of our PBOC's priority, and we have been taking financial actions in this regard. In the past, we have set up a green finance system through green debt and green credit. We have helped new energy with a lot of funding and helped with their growth. Now, we are building a transformative financial system that will target traditional energies, fossil energies transition, and give them strong support. Last November, PBOC created a new currency support tool called a special loan for clean use of coals. We have 200 billion RMB to support coal-related industries and to help them with low carbon transformation. And to implement this policy, at the beginning of this year, I went to Shanghai Waigaoqiao.
这家厂啊，技术非常的先进，它每度电
I went to a power generation company.
全球领先。
It has a world-leading capacity in electricity generation, and one technology comes with their own IPR. And actually, we can help our traditional or conventional companies to upgrade their technology systems and reduce coal consumption in power generation. And the company, the bank, the PBOC, agreed to issue loans to such companies. With the loan, our coal power generation companies can have enough financing to upgrade their systems. According to our estimation, if applied nationwide, each year we can reduce more than 40 million tons of coal for China and reduce carbon emission by 110 tons of carbon. I believe the nation will take stronger measures, not only in the financial sector. Currently, we are practicing a new system of financial sector supporting the energy sector. We support wind power, photovoltaic power, and also help fossil fuel sector to lower their carbon emission with our financing. Looking into the future, I think we should make full use of financial tools and wisdom to serve this sector and to maintain a good ecological environment and our planet. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jin, for your comments on green finance. More questions?
请南区第2排靠过道那位记者提问。
谢谢主持人。
Thank you.
我是工人日报和中公网的记者。
I'm from Workers' Daily.
提问给武刚委员。
My question is for Mr. Wu Gang. Good morning. Carbon peaking and carbon neutrality are our solemn commitments to the whole world, and realizing those goals shall require a stronger role of your sector. So would you please talk about how the wind power sector can help us realize those goals from your experience? Thank you for the question. The just concluded Beijing Winter Olympics is the first one, the first carbon neutral Winter Olympics. And wind power from Zhangbei has played a very important role. The wind of Zhangbei lights the Beijing Winter Olympics. I started my explorations many years ago, so I witnessed the whole journey of our wind power sector. From Dabancheng in Xinjiang Autonomous Region to cities in Heilongjiang and many other provinces, we can see a lot of wind turbines. The dual goals can be realized, we are confident. And our confidence comes from those facts and figures. China, the total installation power of wind power has been leading the whole world. And we have become the largest manufacturer of wind power equipment. And we are also a strong exporter in equipment and component export. The wind power installation has, over the years, increased by 4-fold. And our offline wind power capacity has doubled, more than doubled. Wind power has become the third major power source after hydropower and coal-fired power. Xinjiang, Gansu, Qinghai, and other provinces that are rich in wind resources have become breeding grounds for wind power industry development. You may wonder, what are the contributions of wind power to realizing the dual goals? I can share with you some data. carbon intensity of wind power is 100 that of coal-fired power. And in Xinjiang and in Mongolia, each year we serve Central China and East China and supply them with 40 billion kilowatts of clean electricity. Wind is an important resource. Currently, the top 10 wind power equipment manufacturers have 4 Chinese companies. Our wind power has also reached more than 40 countries on 6 continents. The wind of Zhangbei not only lights up Beijing, the green energy of China will also reach millions of households of the whole world, and we are very confident in achieving the dual carbon emission reduction goals, and we are on our way. Thank you, Mr. Wu Gang, for talking about wind power.
That's the ongoing Members Corridor event at this year's CPPCC national session. So far 2 political advisors have spoken at this press event. One's from China's central bank, focusing on green finance, and the other is actually from the green energy sector. Gentlemen, let's talk a little bit more about this. Mr. Tangen, first of all, tell us more about the innovation in China's green financing system.
Well, the innovation is when you start it, and you have to have, they have carbon credits system, which they've been, it's been around for a while, but it's become quite serious in the last few years. And what this does is it allow companies that are existing to sell their carbon credits to others who then pay for it, and then the money is basically a check on doing further things that are more polluting. You have to meet your emissions goals, and you can either buy or sell depending on whether you're saving emissions or not. The other part is the financing area, and what this is really about is money, and it's the cost of money, long-term money. Because what we were talking about, if you're trying to retrofit a factory, it's actually more expensive than if you're building a new factory. But you don't really have choices in some instances. So you have to bring the financing down to as small as possible. And that means you have to have pools of investors out there. Now, there are some investors, sovereign wealth funds, who are saying, look, we want to do this, we want to support it. But in many cases, it takes the government in order to do that. And there have been various proposals. China is going very straightforward. They're just saying, we're going to lower the financing, we're going to give you what you need in order to create it. But green financing is one thing, but one thing I want to bring attention to is when you were talking about the wind power and the fact that China decided that it needed renewables, that it had the wind resources, and they were going to do it. But this had a beneficial effect, and it became the leading producer of all the equipment, and now the major exporter of this equipment. So it is not only helping China, it is helping the world by bringing down the cost and providing the equipment necessary to make more renewables.
Tell us a little bit more about the role the central bank has been playing in this green financing bit. And let me refer you to some remarks from Mr. Jing. He said, talking about green finance, the central bank used to focus on bonds and credit. And now he mentioned a specific loan program focusing on reducing the pollution of coal and maybe eventually create something much more efficient and greener. Tell us more about that bit.
It's all about the cost of money. I keep coming back to that. I was in as an investment banker for a while, and I can tell you, it's what is my revenue line? I have to make money as a business. Now, this is interesting because you had the People's Bank of China, and then you had a private company, and they're both talking about the same things from perhaps slightly different angles. But from the policy side, you have to bring the costs down so that it is doable. Otherwise, you're adding costs to consumers. If you just say, look, you have to do this, all right, then you're going to have inflation because the companies are forced to invest the money. The better way of doing it is spreading it over a long period of time, bringing down the cost of money, the interest that you pay. Ideally, it would be down to zero, or you give tax breaks and things like this. So this is the area that not only China is doing, but it's being pioneered around the world, how to bring down the cost of creating a better, greener.
And is it really all about policy banks? Are commercial banks maybe catching up?
Yeah, but I mean, commercial banks have to make money. I mean, a policy bank is a policy bank. I was on a policy bank. We didn't consider how much money we were making. We were considering what our policy objectives were. And when you start talking about the environment and you're trying to mix it around, people making money from policies that are being paid for by the people, that becomes a little bit more difficult. So on the commercial side, yes, they are doing it, but it's going to depend on the pool of financing that's out there. And generally, the commercial banks are working very closely with the policy banks because they're the ones who are providing the economic impetus to bring down the cost of funds.
Right.
Now let's hear the next group of advisors taking questions from the press.
This is the ongoing press event from this year's CPPCC session. It's called Members Corridor. Political advisors are meeting the press.
请两位委员做自我介绍。
CPPCC members, please introduce yourselves. Good morning, everyone. I'm Yang Jie. I'm from Changjihui Autonomous Prefecture of Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. Good morning, everyone. I'm from Zoomline Heavy Industry Science and Technology. Questions, please.
请南区第二排中间那位记者提问。
谢谢主持人。
Thank
我是
you.
中国政协杂志和中国政协
I'm
传媒
from
网的记者。
CPPCC
我想提问
magazine.
杨洁委员。
My question is for
杨委员
Mr.
您好
Yang Jie.
筑牢中华民族共同体意识，对于做好新时代的
The
新疆工作
community
至关重
of
要。我知道您来自美丽的
The
西域
Chinese
春
people
城
is
胡
very
图地，这里
important.
呢也是全
I
国
know
民
you
族
come
团
from
结进步
Xinjiang
分
Uyghur
享。
Autonomous
能否
Region,
请您讲一
and
讲发生
your
在身边
prefecture
的民
is
族团结
also
故事？
outstanding in the people's solidarity. So could you share with us some stories on ethnic solidarity? Thank you for the question. I'm a Hui ethnic, and I come from Changjihui Autonomous Prefecture. In my prefecture, there are 25 ethnic minorities. They live together, and the ethnic groups are like brothers. And each and every day we have so many stories, moving stories. In Hutubi County, we have a volunteer team. All the year round, they appear at different corners of the county to help poverty-stricken households and left alone senior people. And they have become very famous. And their story actually is closely related to a Han ethnic called Wang Yang. He's already 80 years old, and he has been helping ethnic minority groups whenever he sees that people suffer from inconvenience. This auntie Wang Guizhen helps such people doing their housework and regard them as her own family members. For more than 3 decades, she gives such care and service to more than 200 ethnic minority people. She's also regarded as Tonghan by Hui people. And also moved by her, more and more people have joined such service. Currently, we have more than 26,000 such volunteers. Their priority is to help with ethnic solidarity and to spread love and care. Such stories are very common in Hutubi County, in Changji Prefecture, and in Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. And the stories are moving us all. And I think the community of shared future for Chinese people has taken its root in all ethnic groups. In Hutubi County, in a village, a woman called Letipe brought up a Han girl. Another touching story. More than 10 years ago, the woman's husband passed away during a car accident. She was left with 2 sons, but she took home a Han girl, an orphan. Thanks to her care, the girl has grown up. Now her biggest expectation is that this girl could enter university. I was born in Xinjiang and grew up and have my career in Xinjiang Autonomous Region. So I witnessed the whole journey of Xinjiang's development. I also benefited from it. Currently in Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, all the ethnic minority groups are joining their hands, helping each other, and they are showing solidarity. I'm so confident that our prosperity will also carry on into the future. Thank you. Thank you for sharing us such solidarity stories from Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. More questions?
请北区第1排靠过道这位记者提问。
谢谢主持人。
Thank you.
我是中国国际电视台 CGTN 的记者。
With CGTN, my question is for Zheng Chunxin. The Belt and Road Initiative has helped equipment manufacturing companies to go abroad, and your company has also seized this opportunity. So, according to you, how can we turn our advantages into actions in BRI cooperation and help with the building of a community with shared future for mankind? Thank you for the question. The Belt and Road Initiative has contributed to global prosperity and development. It's a new path and a new platform for win-win outcomes among businesses. My company is a participant in BRI. In countries along the Belt and Road, we have set up many platforms and projects, and those projects cover 87 countries and regions. Our products serve all the engineering projects. Some are utility projects, some are nuclear power plants, and it also covers other infrastructure projects and some commercial construction projects. For example, we have a project in Sri Lanka. That's the highest tower in that country, and we also have similar projects in Egypt, in Bangladesh. We bought many companies abroad, but we have been upholding to rules, laws, efficiency, independence, and unified governance. According to those rules, we didn't lay off anyone in the companies we acquired, and we didn't even send any of our staff members to those companies. But the strategies, budget, And overhead costs of those companies merged have been incorporated into our strategy, and they have been aligned with our rules. Currently, those companies have been functioning very well. Despite COVID-19, our income has increased by 30%. I mean, those companies we bought overseas, and they helped create employment in one place from local government and commercial sector. So I think we can see the spirit of the BRI implemented in our projects. China's equipment manufacturing sector shall give full play to its advantages and turn such advantages into concrete actions, concrete cooperation. And we shall build a community of shared future for mankind. Our projects shall be localized, local rules shall be respected, and we shall come together with local people using local culture. Thank you, Mr. Zhang.
Well, as we heard right there, the two advisors were focusing on different aspects of their duties. One is on ethnic unity and the other on China proposed Belt and Road Initiative. We have, in terms of ethnic unity, we have a grandma who was, taking care, providing care for a family in need for over 3 decades, and that's a huge commitment. And then we also have a mother, a woman who adopted and raised a girl from another ethnic group. So really, the CPPCC is widely, broadly representative and inclusive. How does it work to promote ethnic unity and the integration of different aspects of society, be it ethnic or different religious groups? How does it work to facilitate this unity?
Well, it's not about preaching, it's about practice. And, with the international community, especially the press and the government's always critical of Xinjiang, I think what he was trying to express is, look, I live in a local area and we take care of ourselves. It's not about ethnic division or anything, but it's really hard to express. I wish we'd been able to see this grandmother and the mother who took in this Han girl. These are the moving stories that really make a civil society. And what we're talking about is paying it forward. He said the examples that these people set have attracted other people to donate their time and energy, not to dividing each other, but to supporting each other. Communities exist everywhere. And I'm hoping that somehow this will translate to people in other parts of the world, and they understand that people are trying to take care of each other. These are difficult times. We need to come together, not figure out ways to divide ourselves.
And expanding this idea of community even further to the international community, we have the Belt and Road Initiative, and the concept is to build a community of shared future. How does the CPPCC work to promote that end?
Well, the CPPCC, the advisors, the members here, we have noticed that there are basically 2 natures or characteristics of their kind of the members corridor. The first is show their achievement in their specialized area, like the SOE, the managers, these entrepreneurs. The other aspect is to show the achievement of China's kind of policy and China's contribution to the world. So the BRI, the One Belt, One Road Initiative, and the involvement of other countries, the mutual, let's say, prosperity and the mutual development just signifies the contribution of China to the global development, and that represents the Global Development Initiative. So this could be this could be argued that only a small group of countries got prosperity, got developed, got rich. Does not necessarily mean the richness, the prosperity of the whole world. The whole world relies on as many countries as possible to get involved in the development. So that is the essence. That is the, let's say, the real meaning, spirit of the One Belt Road. Not only means making money or getting rich by the certain country, but also to get as many people as possible in this prosperity circle.
Let's talk about one specific example, Mr. Tang. We just heard from the chairman of Zoom Lion, one of China's leading heavy machinery manufacturing and research company. He mentioned these management mode or style, if you will, regarding foreign mergers and acquisitions on the Belt and Road Initiative. What do you make of this mode?
Well, there's once again, there's this kind of popular misconception that the Chinese move in and then literally move in. They bring all the staff and all the engineers, and that's not true anymore. In areas where you do have problems getting the expertise or workers, Chinese workers and expertise have been brought in. But increasingly, it's a much more modern situation where they say, look, we're making acquisition. We're not buying distressed goods. We're buying a working company, and we're going to work with that company to continue their success. And this is the kind of globalization, but a couple of important things to remember. Every job that was been created in China has resulted in 1.3 jobs being created outside of China. China believes in this idea that to get rich, build a road. But if you're going to build a road, you need machinery to do it. So China is really trying to export what worked for China, and not in terms of ideology, but simply saying you need infrastructure. If you're a farmer and you can't get your goods to market, it's like a tree that falls in the forest, no one hears it. So they're really trying to make a difference, and that's what the BRI is about.
What has kept this BRI, resilient despite the pandemic? We know there are economic headwinds, there are some resistance from, certain Western countries. But what has kept its momentum and to really keep it going for so long was vitality?
Need. I mean, you just had another 10 countries sign on to it. They're not doing that because they have nothing else to do or they don't have other priorities. These are tough times that we're facing. And if we're going to get out of them, we need to do it together. And that means that you have to have the infrastructure to do the kind of trade where you can, start employing people, start utilizing your resources. So this is not about China's desire to enforce something on other countries. These countries are joining, like Argentina. Why are they joining? Because they see the opportunities. So that is things. But one of the things about BRI, used to be a lot of the projects were government to government. The Chinese government would sit down with the opposite and say, hey, what do you want to do? Now, increasingly, it's project to project. And what I mean by that is China is providing a lot of the expertise, but there has to be some viability. They want to see that this pencils out. They don't want situations where China's being accused of diplomacy because the local government at that time decided to do something in an area which perhaps was not the optimal area. So it's a learning process that China is going through. But what's important is China continues to improve the model, just as it does at home. It does this the same abroad.
Your thoughts on this, Professor?
It's getting more and more of a project-oriented rather than government guide or government sponsored. Although we noticed that the government sponsor is the background of this PRI initiative, it does involve all the private company and other kind of the institutions of higher education and the cultural exchange organizations to get involved all these things. Just like Mr. Tangen said, this provide opportunities for different countries and the peoples in different countries. They need this kind of the sense of the future. They need this kind of inspiration because when you don't have anything to do, when you don't have the employment, when you have all this kind of stress, it will become a panic, and panic is the thing that the government does not want to have. So this BRI project bring hope, bring future, bring inspiration, and bring stimulation to not only government but also other kind of organization, including the private and public sectors.
And connectivity is the pillar of the Belt and Road Initiative. That includes connectivity among people's minds. Now, you work in the education sector, Professor. Tell us more about people-to-people exchanges under the Belt and Road Initiative. That's more of a soft side, right?
Yes, we have actually, in our university, we have a school of Silk and Road, but not in Beijing, in Suzhou campus. And that campus has been built, just right after President Xi Jinping proposed this BRI. And this school of Silk and Road provided a lot of opportunities, provided a lot of programs for not only the people, students from developed countries, also from the developing countries. I myself have supervised 3 students from different countries. And actually, I have never been to their country, and they proposed the thesis. They want to study the relation between their country and China, and they want to study the ancient people's kind of involvement into for example, the Sino-Italian relation. They study the Matteo Ricci and his contribution to the cultural exchange. And another student studied the Sino-Azerbaijan relation, the oil industry and all this kind of infrastructure, transportation. I find that they really kind of inspired, and they get excited in studying the Sino and in the relation between China and his own home country. And they, some of them, pursue the further study in mainland China and in Hong Kong and in other kind of foreign countries. I felt that this is opportunity for them to know China, and this is opportunity for Chinese people to know, the partners along this kind of Belt and Road Initiative.
Yeah. I want to go back to an earlier discussion where we were talking about green financing. Mr. Tangen was talking about how these policy banks, the policy banks' role, and you added what could commercial banks do in this regard. I just want to ask. Is it possible in the near future that maybe private capital can jump in this regard? Because some CPPCC members have proposed that the government should let more private capital into areas that have been previously dominated by state capital. For example, new infrastructure, new energy, new technologies, pension, healthcare, and things like that. Is it possible for private capital to lend a hand?
Oh, absolutely, and it's not just one-sided. This is not just the policy banks and things like that. There's also the investment in new technology, and that's where you see a lot of the private investment. They're looking at the opportunities to invest in companies that are coming up with the solutions for tomorrow, and from that they will earn money. So private capital isn't on the side. In terms of areas where China has historically kept that on the SOE side, you're hearing a lot.
Right, gentlemen, let's go back to the members' corridor.
More questions, please.
请举手示意。请南区第二排最外侧那位记者提问。
谢谢主持人，我是农民日报
Thank
中国
you.
农
I'm
网
from
记者。
Farmers Daily.
我想提问欧燕玲委员。
My question is for Wang Yang. In 2021, we won the battle against extreme poverty and built a moderately prosperous society in all respects, and all the ethnic minority groups have been taken out of poverty. And now we are working on the transition between poverty reduction and rural revitalization. So according to you, what's the biggest advantage for Mula Autonomous County? And what are your plans in consolidating your achievements in poverty reduction and developing rural revitalization? I want to thank you for your interest. Luocheng is the only Mula Autonomous County in China. We have a total population of 180,000, and 80% of this Mula ethnic minorities population lives here in Luocheng, and we have done a lot of effort in paying attention to eco-protection and green development of our industries. For example, we have a beautiful natural landscape and ethnic features here, so we have advantages in developing tourism. Cotton village of Luocheng used to be a poor place, and girls didn't want to marry into this village. After fact-finding trips and introducing investment into this village, we have developed resources there to tap local advantages. And after a few years, this cotton village has become a famous tourist site, and people there have become richer. In the past, people work on their poor arable land and live in shabby houses. But after development of tourist resources, people can work in tourist sites and have a monthly salary of 2,500 RMB. And this gentleman told us that CPC's work has helped us to enjoy such a beautiful life, and in gratitude of CPC's policies, they have even revised the lyrics of their songs. Now people have better housing, cars, and even wives are willing to marry into this place. We have a national tourist place, and here water is very good, has very high quality, and good for alcohol making. And we have tried to build a local water brand and a cluster of industries. So beautiful landscape and good water resources have helped with our growth. And I want to say that Luocheng has a special grape, a wild grape. It is not only good for developing beverage products, but it can also help with ecological improvement. We have developed a series of agricultural products that help improve people's income while preserving the ecological environment. We helped less developed ethnic regions, and we tapped advantages and multiple resources. Only by developing resources while protecting the environment can we add more momentum into rural revitalization. I welcome all of you to visit Luocheng to enjoy our landscape, our beautiful projects, and the water there. Thank you for sharing with us the story on rural revitalization and industry revitalization. Thank you for taking questions here, and I want to thank friends from the media. This is the end of today's Members Corridor, and we have finished all sessions of Members Corridor at the 5th session of the 13th CPC National Committee. I look forward to seeing you next year at the Members Corridor.
That was the Members Corridor Press event for this year's CPPCC session. Just speaking is a national political advisor from grassroots level. She's of Mulao ethnicity from Guangxi province, and she's also the deputy head of China's only Mulao autonomous county. She spent quite a lot of time talking about their efforts to get out of poverty and try to make their hometown prosperous under the national policy. Now,
she mentioned rural revitalization, which is the country's leading strategy on agriculture, rural areas, and rural residents.
Yeah, that's kind of the next target for China after getting all of the people out of extreme poverty. Now, gentlemen, let's talk a little bit more about this. In the government work report delivered by the Premier this year, we noticed that, yes, China has eradicated extreme poverty, but a main task, of course, is to getting people to a more prosperous life, but at the same time, must prevent collective slipping back into poverty. Why this policy decision? What's the thought behind it, Professor?
Actually, I always argue that poverty reduction and rural revitalization is not only an economic issue. It is an economic issue, of course, but it is also a political issue because it involves the political stability, involves the society of Chinese characteristics. Like we just mentioned in previous session of the discussion, the consolidation of Chinese nationality, nation identity. So this rural revitalization just represented by this from Luocheng County. Actually, their rural revitalization and poverty reduction is highly related to China's ethnicity policy. And this is the consolidation and solidarity of Chinese national identity. You want people to follow you. And they would ask, what's in it for me? Okay, this is the natural mindset, okay, right? So you can attract them by slogan, by value, all these kind of things. But the value and the slogan works for a while. But if you want them to follow you, for a long time, you need to fulfill their need. And
there needs to be a true incentive.
Exactly. So this is the true essence of China's, let's say, the rural vitalization policy or the poverty reduction policy. It does not only to solve your question, solve your problem in this year or next year. They would stimulate your kind of spirit for further development. And that's the kind of the cause for the bond together, like a metaphor used by that member previously, pomegranate. Pomegranate is kind of fruit. They connect together, they stick together, just like this kind of thing. So this metaphor is first used by President Xi Jinping to describe the solidarity consolidation of Chinese national identity. And national identity, can be constructed, but in China it must be constructed for the further development because it is the base for the China's, the nation, the rejuvenation of Chinese nation. So that's my take on this question. It's not a pure economic question. It is also a political question.
So let's talk a little bit more about the Communist Party of China's role in getting all the people in China out of extreme poverty. Mr. Tangen, what do you make of the CPC's role in this?
I'll answer that question. You tell me what's in it for me. I'm just, right. No, I mean, there's a contrast. Yes, the role of government is it can't do the work for you. China did not succeed because just of the government. The amount of hard work and sacrifice, the hundreds of millions of migrant workers who built the cities that we are currently in. This was things, the one-child policy. Everything has come at a cost, and a lot of it is hard work and thinking. In this particular case, what you see is the party encouraging locals to figure out what their advantages are. And to give you a sense of just how much things have changed. When I first came to China, people were talking about eating meat more than once a year. That's when things, it was essentials. Food, water, housing. There's no rationing. Now we're talking about areas which are devoting themselves to tourism, because it's the only way they can climb the value chain. Their soils are not rich enough to support decent farming. So this is how the government works. They try to recognize and help things. They send out experts to every village when they're trying to develop a local plan, and they say, look, this is what other areas have done. Maybe you can try this. Here's 3 or 4 ideas. Then the local villages discuss. They decide as a group. And this is the part you don't see here. It wasn't her decision to do this. She would have sat down with the entire village and said, look, how should we do this? There would have been a vote. I've been to these concaves where they talk about this and make these decisions. And that's how they go forward. So, there's a lot more nuance to this than people's perception that, Xi Jinping says you should be a tourist area. It doesn't happen that way. There's so much more involved in governance, and anybody who's involved in governance anywhere in the world would know that.
Yeah, and innovation really also plays a key part in the transformation, the vitalization of rural areas. For example, not just the innovation of technologies, it's also about new ideas. Transforming a village in a remote area into a tourist spot is no easy task. So this idea of innovation to enhance scientific and technological innovation, it's also crucial for rural vitalization. It involves risks, as we all know, but what could be done to really encourage economically vulnerable places like rural areas to truly embrace innovation?
Innovation, in my opinion, actually innovation or creation does not necessarily mean to use or to find out, to search new material, to look for something that other people ignore. Innovation and creation also means that to reveal, to perceive the previous thing in a new outlook, with a new perspective. That's the China's kind of the rural vitalization policy. The essence of this policy to teach the kind of the poor area to teach those kind of the previous poor people to know their situation, to get to reinvestigate their quality. To reinvestigate their condition, to try to employ this condition to find another way for further development. So this creation, this innovation does not necessarily mean to introduction or to installment of a new technology. That's a new installment of a new idea. Just like the word you inception, you incepted a new idea that they can use their condition to find a new way out. So that's kind of a long-term project, and it is key to the further development of China's, the rejuvenation of Chinese nationality.
And Professor, let me follow up on that. Talking about innovation, let me go back to your earlier notion of the mass line of the CPC. We know that during China's massive poverty alleviation campaign, millions of CPC cadres were sent into grassroots levels to help local people get out of poverty. Do you think that's kind of an innovation from the principle of the mass line, of course, in the new era?
Yes, of course, and this is the kind of example, a good example of the creation and innovation of this policy, because this poverty reduction and the poverty alleviation is not like people sitting in their office telling all the followers that you should do this kind of thing, you should do other kind of thing. If these officials, if this kind of cadres do not go down to the village to reinvestigate what the villagers really need, and they couldn't create, they couldn't make a policy situated fit to the real condition. So that's we can say the re-employment of this mass line that was successful in the revolutionary era into this new construction, new development era. And it is also a continuity of the CPC's kind of policy and the continuity of the CPC's, line and theory. So this is also, I would like to argue that this is a key to the success of the CPC.
Right, gentlemen, we'll be getting back to you very soon. It looks like going green is a hot topic this year's political season, right? So China is actually now the world's largest carbon emitter. It has been rolling out policies to reduce its carbon footprint.
And these include cutting its reliance on fossil fuels, boosting the proportion of renewable resources in the country's energy mix, and increasing the size of forests. Our reporters Li Jianhua and Dong Xue have more on this.
Hey, Jianhua.
Hey.
What are you reading?
Some reports on global carbon emissions. It's projected that China will release some 11.5 billion tons of carbon dioxide emissions this year, which makes China the top emitter.
I see. But hold on. So when divided by 1.4 billion, on average, each person in China contributes about 820 kilograms of carbon dioxide emission per year. I didn't realize I could produce so much CO2.
Neither did I, but look around. Almost everything we do is contributing to carbon emissions. The consumption of electricity to charge our laptops, the combustion of fossil fuels to warm houses, and even the consumption of meat.
True, global warming has become a top international issue. The Paris Climate Agreement in 2015 and COP 2016 in Glasgow last year zoomed in on it.
China is aiming to peak its carbon emissions before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. In 2020, coal burning accounted for 49% of energy production in China, and hydropower accounted for 17%.
And solar energy, 11%. And the wind power stood at 13%. In 2030, it will be a different picture.
Yeah, you're right. Coal burning will produce 27% of the energy needed, and hydropower will be 15%.
And solar power will go up to 27%, and the wind power will rise to 21%.
Finally, in 2060 or before 2060, when China achieves carbon neutrality, coal burning will be out and hydropower will be 10%.
And solar power will be 47% and wind power will be 31%. Besides, increasing the energy use rate will also help.
Yeah, you're right. In 2021, the production and sales of new energy vehicles both exceeded 3.5 million, recording a year-on-year increase of 160%.
Well, getting to the point of net zero greenhouse gas emissions doesn't mean China will stop producing emissions.
Yes, it means that China will cut emissions. In the meantime, it will absorb what is left with various means.
Statistics show that the carbon sequestration capacity increased from 19 billion tons of carbon dioxide in 1990 to 32 billion in 2020.
By 2060, the number is estimated to increase by 15 billion. Well, to guarantee the achievement of carbon neutrality, we need to make sure that all of these policies can be fully implemented.
And more importantly, each individual nation and the region should work to lessen their carbon footprint.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The cleanup operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Well, Saturday marks the end of the local state of emergency.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
You're watching CGTN. This is a special coverage on this year's CPPCC session. National Committee Chairman Wang Yang is going to deliver final remarks of the session.
That's right. And now let's talk to our reporter Cao Bing at the Media Center in Beijing. Well, Cao Bing, you've been covering the meetings over the past week. Walk us through some of the highlights.
Hello, Mama. From plenary sessions, panel discussions to members' corridors, the past 6 days of this year's annual meeting of China's top advisory body have been packed with action. It began with a work report delivered by Wang Yang, chairman of CPPCC National Committee. The body is an indispensable part in state affairs. Wang pledged the CPPCC will continue to promote high-quality development with high-quality recommendations when outlining the future task for 2022. The report highlighted unity too. Wang called on its members to reach out to the people and promote harmony in relations between political parties, ethnic groups, religions, compatriots at home and abroad. He asked all members to strike a balance between commonality and diversity to achieve the greatest possible convergence of interests. Meanwhile, Hong Kong affairs also discussed. The chairman encouraged members from Hong Kong to voice their support for improving the electoral system of the special administrative region and promoting the implementation of patriots governing Hong Kong. The work report was informative, and so are the proposals. This year, over 2,000 members from 34 sectors have come to Beijing, bringing thousands of proposals on political, social, and technical issues. Here are some highlights. Several Hong Kong legislators and political advisors have proposed a strengthening patriotic education as the region is marking the 25th anniversary of its return to China in 2022, which resonated with the call from the work report we talked about just now. Meanwhile, multiple members have spotlighted climate change, proposing more efforts in fighting against and the water pollution, as well as for ecological restoration. That echoed China's pledge to peak carbon emission by 2030 and become carbon neutral by 2060. There were also calls for more efforts to tackle trafficking and abuse of women and children. This is because in recent years, an increasing number of such cases has triggered a strong public concern. The annual session will conclude soon with a closing ceremony. This is the last year for the current session of the CPPCC. Meanwhile, the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China will be held later this year. These two major issues are likely to be touched upon by Chairman Wang Yang in the closing remarks. One thing worth mentioning is the CPPCC is an embodiment of the whole process people's democracy, and the closing ceremony is not putting a period on the mark, but a column, meaning efforts will continue in supporting the governance of the country. Back to you, Mama.
Thank you so much, our Cao Bing, bringing us the latest from the Media Center. During the CPPCC session, Chinese President Xi Jinping has met with the country's top political advisors.
He stressed ensuring key agricultural product supply and building stronger social security networks. Victor Ning has more.
Chinese President Xi Jinping visited national political advisors from the sectors of agriculture, welfare, and social security on Sunday. He participated in their joint group meeting and listened to their comments and suggestions. He first recognized the contributions of CPPCC members made in the past year and stressed that China still boasts multiple strategic advantages as the world is entering a new period of turbulence. Xi Jinping stressed the need for food security. He highlighted the importance of filling the rice bowl of the Chinese people mainly with Chinese grain, and he also called for continued efforts to curb food waste and ensure the area and quality of farmland. He said the ultimate solution to safeguarding food security lies in enhancing science and technology. Xi said rural vitalization involves more than economic development. He urged ethical and moral education among farmers and law-based governance. On social welfare, Xi called for efforts to develop a multi-tiered and multi-pillar pension system to bring more people into the social security system. He also called for a better social security system for workers in flexible employment, highlighting efforts to expand the coverage of various types of insurance. On vulnerable groups, Xi said extra attention and care should be given, especially to the elderly and children in rural areas. The president also said illegal acts of bullying or abusing women, children, the elderly, and the disabled must be rooted out. Victor Ning, CGTN.
So as we heard it right there, President Xi Jinping always participates in discussions with CPPCC members and also with NPC deputies. The NPC is running in parallel with the CPPCC sessions, and some of the focus was on social security, food security, of course. And now let's hear more from our guests here in the studio. So, food security. Of course, feeding 1.4 billion people is not an easy task. And in China, the minister from the Agricultural and Rural Affairs Department was saying that China is confident to provide enough food for the country's population in this coming year. Are you confident, considering there are the economic headwinds from the pandemic and also natural disasters was also taking their toll on the nation?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Actually, this is the question that I would like to talk about for a long time because, in my class about the Chinese politics, I always teach my students that the Chinese politics is not always about the political institution, the political structure, this elite struggle or something. Chinese politics is involving each and every ordinary people's livelihood. So the food security, the quality of the production, and whether Chinese people can have enough food produced by Chinese people, growing in Chinese land, it is essential to China's further development. So we can say that along this, in the last 5 years, we've been noticed that the Chinese agriculture has made a great achievement. So averagely, average people in China can have 2.5 gene the grain, so it's kind of 1.25 kilogram for each day for each Chinese person. So that is the basic line. So we've noticed that this is a basic. Even though Chinese agriculture has made a great achievement, it is still a basic line. That's the kind of a red line for China to be cautious that if we do not do more work, if we do not be kind of cautious, and this will be slipped to a very insecure situation. So that's why Chinese kind of government, pay a lot of attention to the innovation and technology, investment and other kind of investment in the agricultural field. So that is why Chinese the President Xi Jinping mentioned the safety of the grain and the outlook of the grain, outlook of the greater food security is mentioned here and proposed by him. So that's I would like to say the essence of Chinese politics.
And talking about bottom lines, Mr. Tang, we noticed that for years, for decades even, China has been emphasizing this red line, bottom line of 1.8 billion mu of arable land in the country. So why this specific figure? And do you think it's very challenging at this moment because urbanization and some other projects from some regional decision making are going on?
Well, China needs to, I mean, the amount of arable land in China is equal to the different areas like the U.S., but China produces a lot more. This is the 11th straight year that China's been able to increase its grain production and things like that. So, things have really changed since the opening up. You go back to, the Southern Tour and, they're saying opening up and, you allowing farmers to, have an incentive to not only produce what they needed for the nation, but for themselves. This resulted in a huge change in the way that China's going about things. But there are headwinds out there. I mean, water pollution, soil pollution. A one single little camera battery, your lithium camera battery, if that's buried in the ground, it can contaminate 1 square meter of soil. So there's got to be a lot of attention paid not only to conserving the land, making sure that you're disposing things properly, but also, Xi Jinping made a very good point about this issue about not wasting. I mean, it used to be you'd go into restaurants and, people had for a long time done without. So they wanted to show that there was plenty there. So it was a status thing. Oh, don't worry about it. Lots and lots of dishes. And then at the end, people wouldn't even take it home. Today, I rarely see that. And that makes a huge amount of difference. In terms of the global situation, yeah, I agree. Very, very difficult, and China's very aware. But China is not involved in any kind of economic sanctions with Russia. Russia's going to have a surplus of wheat that's going to go. The real question is what happened to Ukraine. If they do not make the spring planting season,
right,
there are a lot of people
Let's go back to China. Challenges also remain. For example, natural disasters are forecasted for this year, especially during the summer season. Now, since we've talked about agriculture, what about people's welfare? What are the main challenges and government policies to deal with those?
Yes, that's another issue. That's another aspect of the security issue because in 2022, in the 14th five-year plan, we've noticed that the President Xi Jinping proposed that in the future we should balance the development and the security. And this security, most of the scholars would argue that this security means state security, national security. In my opinion, the meaning of this security is broader, expanded to more than national security, state security. It also involves social security. So that's the security, that's the safety of the livelihood of ordinary people. Like we have the aging populations policy, we have the 3-kid policy, we have the education policy. All these kind of policies, the cohort of the policies, direct to the social security. People, people want to live better. People want to live in a better situation, and that they can, they hope to live a better situation. So previously, like Mr. Tangen said, they eat meat once a year, but nowadays they don't eat meat. They want to know the quality of the meat. Where does this meat come from? Or where does this kind of, let's say, water come from, the fruit come from? So this all involve the upgrade of people's opinion. And this also exemplifies the upgrade of Chinese government's policy in terms of social security.
Well, gentlemen, as we're talking about this, the closing ceremony of this year's CPPCC session is underway. The members now voting on political resolutions. They've just passed a work report from the Standing Committee of the CPPCC, a report on proposal-related work since the end of the last session, and another report examining these proposals. And we'll keep you updated as the closing ceremony is underway. Now let's go back to our earlier discussions. Gentlemen, social security you were talking about, Professor.
Yes, the social security actually is a very broad kind of spectrum, and we've noticed that just like I mentioned in the 14th five-year plan, the security chapter or the chapters of the social security actually holds the large part, the larger part of this proposal, not only for the next 5 year but also for the next 15 year, and this laid down the foundation for the rejuvenation of Chinese kind of nationality or the rejuvenation of Chinese nation. And with all the social groups, with all the social categories developed and upgraded, can we talk about the rejuvenation of Chinese nation in the overall situation? So that is why I, in my class, I teach my students to get to know more about the social policy. It is not a boring kind of question. It is a real question about the China's politics. So that is why we hear a lot of members talking about the social policy, talking about the change of their hometown, talking about the contribution of the policy to their local areas. So this is the kind of the thing that we should kind of pay attention in Chinese politics.
I want to pursue to one specific point. If we talk about, the social security network, and then there are different aspects. For example, a falling fertility rate, an aging population, and all these demographic factors have implications on almost every aspect of the world's second largest economy. How concerned are you about this, aging trend in Chinese society? That means that not enough people are entering the workforce, and then the government will have to shoulder great responsibility in providing pension for the elderly.
That is why, paralleling to this policy to the aging population, Chinese government also, pay too much attention and investment to the AI the sector. So they want to kind of to upgrade the efficiency of the machine, to upgrade the efficiencies of all the existing kind of the mechanism, to to save the energy, to save the kind of the all this kind of the energy and the cost, so that more investment, more resources, and more energy can be used to upgrade the living condition. And I think this is also the signal of China into a next step of development.
Your thoughts on this, Mr. Tangen?
Well, I agree. I mean, China's a socialist. They always say a socialist with Chinese characteristics. When I explain China to other people, I say it's socialist pragmatism. And what that means is, they're looking very carefully at the everyday issues. In addition, as my colleague has said about, the ideology and things like that, and it's being pushed now. When Xi Jinping was talking to them, what did he highlight? He highlighted the most vulnerable parts of society, younger children. You see what's been happening the last year. They took away the video games because I don't think anybody will say, oh, video games are really good for you. It'll help your development. It was a babysitter in many cases. Busy parents could just say, oh, just play your video games. But it's not healthy for the children. The elderly. I mean, with the population kind of situation, you're going to have a lot of elderly out there. And I agree. How do you do this efficiently? And he's talked about the issue of using science and technology, and I agree. This is something which is absolutely essential to moving forward. If you're talking about crops, you want to improve the strains and things like that. China is experimenting with not exactly GMO from the U.S. side, but what's been done with rice has been absolutely amazing in terms of the per moo output and things like this. But the same thing's going to happen in robotics. Okay, China's moving into a tertiary society. You're already 54% is the tertiary economy, the services and things like that, and that has to continue. But it's going to be a real driver. It's efficiency, and I completely agree with you. I hope we can talk about the digital yuan and what that's going to do for the world. But almost everything that we're talking about is technology and efficiency, looking to solve people's problems going forward.
Could there be a catch? For example, the introduction and rapid development of AI could, take more jobs away from the people who are, looking for jobs.
Well, this is an interesting thing. I mean, less than 2% of the U.S. population is devoted to agriculture, yet is able to produce more food than anyone in the U.S. could eat. China has 32%. Out there. So, this issue about labor and about population, I think it has to be looked at more carefully, because in one sense, we've said in the next 5 years, 50% of the jobs that we know could disappear. All right, what are these people going to do? Well, they're probably going to go into other sectors, and this is where technology is important. It's not that technology takes away a job, it provides other opportunities. If my essentials, if my food, clothing, power, everything like that can be done with a smaller proportion of the people involved, that leaves more open for services. That's where she was talking about trying to improve tourism in their area, because it works, because people have the additional funds and the choices to make where to go. It's a beautiful place, you should go there. I would argue that the most technologically forward thing she did was her PR. She did a great job. I want to go to that village now. So I think there'll be a lot of other people. So it's not just things. There's also this communication effort, creating brands. I mean, right now, young Chinese designers are the hit of every runway in the world. they're providing these fresh, clean ideas that combine East and West in a new way, rather than the kind of cyclical, fashions that you had for years. Bell bottoms and then skinny jeans, bell bottoms, skinny jeans. Women know this very well. Yeah. So I think China is offering not only something unique to its people, and in trying to do this development model, but also to the world. Something to copy, not ideological, simply very practical.
Professor, would you say China is in this transitioning period mentioned by Mr. Tangen from traditional job-creating modes into more of a digital-driven and the application of more cutting-edge technologies? And if that's the case, how challenging will it be for employment, and let's say this year?
Yes, actually, what we are talking about here is more of philosophical thinking or kind of abstract thinking, a perception and I always argue that the human resources, the human labors shouldn't be wasted. We have to put the human resources to the field that needs them the most. We cannot waste all the human. If this job only needs kind of 2 people, then there is no necessary for us to put 5 people in that kind of, because we have 3 people wasted. Then how should we deal with these 3 people? We put education, we put opportunity, we put other kind of improvement for them in order to create the jobs for them to develop themselves to
Right, gentlemen. Let's cross live to the closing ceremony of this year's CPPCC session. National Committee Chairman Wang Yang is about to speak.
Fellow members, dear comrades, the 5th session of the 13th National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference has completed all the agenda items and is about to conclude. During the session, Mr. Xi Jinping, General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee, President of the PRC, and the Chairman of the Central Military Commission, and other CPC and leaders attended the opening and closing meetings of the session and joined sectoral groups to listen to their comments and discuss the state affairs with CPPCC members. General Secretary Xi Jinping visited CPPCC members from sectors such as agriculture, social welfare, and social protection, and delivered important remarks. His presence is huge encouragement to all the members, and his remarks has important significance for our consultation work. All the members discussed the government's work report and other reports, deliberated on important documents such as the work report of the Standing Committee of the CPPCC, and carried out their consultation duty to address state and CPC central work. Everyone agreed that we shall fully understand the significance to uphold the central position of Comrade Xi Jinping in the CPC Central Committee and the whole party, the guiding position of Xi Jinping thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, understand original thoughts, revolutionary practices, breakthrough progress, and landmark achievements of the new era, and raise our political awareness to uphold the central position of Comrade Xi Jinping in the CPC Central Committee and the whole party, and the authority and centralize the unified leadership of the Central Committee. Everyone agreed that this year, embracing the 20th CPC National Congress, studying, communicating, and implementing the spirit of the Congress shall be significant political tasks, and we shall look for effectiveness in spiritual guidance, outcomes in consultation, and accomplishments in serving the big picture. We shall contribute CPPCC's part to stability and health in the economy, peace and prosperity in the society, and a clean political environment. The session has pulled positive energy across the board and brims with vigor and vitality. We have been holding high the banner of socialism with Chinese characteristics. And this session also features solidarity, democracy, realism, pragmatism, conciseness, and efficiency. fellow members. This year is the last year of the 13th CPPCC National Committee, and at the closing meeting of the first meeting of this CPPCC National Committee, we put forward that we shall fully understand the responsibilities from CPPCC, the political organization, and stress that we shall take a clear political stand and be people-centered while carrying out our duties and be pragmatic in improving our consultative capabilities. Over the 4 years, we have been practicing those work principles and philosophies, and we jointly witnessed important events such as the 70th anniversary of the new China's founding, the centenary of the CPC's founding, and we participated in important practices such as the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, extreme poverty, and building a moderately prosperous society in all respects. And we worked on implementing the spirit of the work conference on CPPCC and advancing the building of dedicated consultative bodies, and improved our political capabilities, our care for the people, and consultation skills. On this new journey, we must continue to work on those principles and philosophies and do a better job. First, we shall continue to take a clear political stand and do a better job. CPPCC is a political body, so taking a political stand shall be the most important requirement for us. Our members come from all walks of life, so they may take different viewpoints on some issues, but they shall not have equivocal political stance, swerve in political principles, or go astray in their political direction. We shall strengthen our political judgments, be adept at observing issues with a political lens and telling the nature in complicated and evolving situations, and tell the truth from the false when confronted with multiple thoughts. And we shall be firmly confident in our system when faced with unprecedented risks and challenges. We shall strengthen our political perceptiveness, learn and believe in CPC's innovative theories, understand fully what is important for the state, and follow closely the CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core in our thinking, political orientation, and actions on our own initiative. We shall strengthen our political implementation capabilities, understand, take on, and deliver our duties. We shall take on the political tasks to implement the CPC Central Committee's decisions, arrangements, and requirements on CPPCC, and to pool the wisdom and power of all Chinese people in and out of China. The CPPCC must continue to work for the interests of the people, and we shall do a better job. CPPCC working for the interests of the people is a clear-cut requirement from General Secretary Xi Jinping at the work conference on CPPCC. It is also a line that we must stand by in CPPCC's work. CPPCC must work for the people's interests to safeguard the vitality and vigor of the basic political system, and only by doing so can we manifest the unique advantage of whole process people's democracy. We shall go to the ground to understand people's needs, listen to their voices, and reflect their concerns, pool the people's wisdom, and we shall be down to earth and seek recognition from people of all walks of life. We shall contribute solutions to resolve people's problems and put forward proposals and recommendations according to the new expectations of the people for a better life, and help the CPC and the government in resolving difficulties in people's welfare and improve people's welfare. We shall enlist the popular support through our services, caring services, and understand our people's concerns, intertwined interests, and potential problems. By putting ourselves in the people's shoes, we shall communicate policies and remove people's thoughts through explanation and encourage solidarity, hard work for better development, and create unity in social environment. We must continue to improve the CPPCC's consultative capabilities and do a better job. CPPCC is a dedicated consultative body, and our work hinges on our consultative capabilities. Intricate circumstances, daunting tasks, and multiple diverse thoughts require a higher consultative capability to pool people's wisdom, solutions, and consensus. Ever since the 18th CPC National Congress, the CPPCC has been actively exploring new ways and platforms to have consultative democracy. Our new explorations have yielded a new image. On the new journey, we shall continue to improve consultation quality, attend to the broad and great while addressing the delicate and minute, put forward pragmatic recommendations, and avoid formalism. We shall build a sound consultative system, pay attention to summarize new experience and practices, and enrich our practices to work out solutions through consultation and make it a regular part of our system. We shall further foster consultative culture so that when we come across problems, we can consult each other with two-way interactions, candidness, and in-depth exchanges. Fellow members, dear comrades, at the closing meeting of the first session of this CPPCC National Committee, we asked all members to return in annual performance reports. And this year, we ask all of you to give a 5-year satisfactory work report. I hope all of you can work tirelessly in carrying out your duties and keep up the good work. Let us rally closer around the CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, strengthen the consciousness of the need to maintain political integrity, think in big picture terms for the leadership core, and keep in alignment, strengthen our confidence in the path theory system and culture of socialism with Chinese characteristics, hold high the banner of our beliefs and ideals, hoist the sail of solidarity and hard work, and use our concrete actions to embrace the successful opening of the 20th Congress of the CPC. Please stand up and sing the national anthem. Now I declare that the 5th session of the 13th CPPCC National Committee has concluded.
That was the closing ceremony of the 5th session of the 13th CPPCC National Committee. National Committee Chairman Wang Yang delivered concluding remarks, and also during the closing ceremony, political advisors passed a work report of the National Committee, a report on proposal-related work since the end of last session, a report on examining proposal-related work, and a political resolution of the National Committee. Now, for more insight, let's talk to our studio guest. Gentlemen, this is actually also the conclusion of the 13th CPPCC National Committee. How would you characterize its work in the past 5 years, Professor?
In the last 5 years, just like Chairman Wang mentioned in his closing remarks, and he argued that this session and witnessed the ceremony of the 70th anniversary of the People's Republic of China, and also the ceremony of the 100th anniversary of the CPC. So, and also this session witnessed the pandemic of the COVID-19. So we can say that this session, the past 5 years, they got a lot of work to do, and they must have dealt with the tough situation. And in my opinion, this session they did a great job. And in terms of to mobilize all the people, to mobilize all the resources to solve the urgent situation, to face to solve the especially to solve the urgent situation in the pandemic, let's say COVID-19. And also in his closing remarks, I've noticed that he mentioned the politics. He mentioned the political stand and in different chapters, in different paragraphs. He said that the diversity, although there are diversity in different members' kind of a view and their so-called fields, conformity is necessary. Conformity is required because the CPPCC, the Political Consultative Conference, the key word of this conference is political. So that's the character of Chinese politics. And I felt that this is also the contribution of this institution to the whole process, people's democracy.
What's your take on this, Ms. Tangdon?
Well, I'm agreeing with my colleague. What you have here, and then this is difficult for people outside of China to understand, but basically they should think about it. It's like the Republican Party used to be. Regardless of what your views were going into the party conference, when you came out, you supported the party position. And this is exactly what happens here in China. And this is what he was talking about. And he says, we have discussions, we come to conclusions. All of you are working hard, and I want you to continue working hard. But remember that our process is not about trying to spread division, but to provide guidance to a society that is still in transition.
Yeah, and the two speeches, both at the opening and the closing sessions, could be seen as not only a report card, but also a roadmap for the future. And Wang Yang just mentioned that, members should be firmly confident in our system when confronted with unprecedented risks and challenges. What do you think he means by these risks and challenges, Mr. Tangdon?
Well, obviously, the situation globally is not settled. And I mean both from a health point, with COVID-19 still somewhat unknown out there. Then you have the animus of the U.S. towards China's system itself. China's success has created an existential threat to the U.S. belief that it only has the only right system. And then you have the situation in Ukraine and other places where you have destabilization, you have food crisis, energy crisis, and there's probably going to be a lot of civil unrest, especially in countries where they don't have enough. The world did not come together at the G20 and figure out a plan for the rest of the world. It was really more bickering and just trying. China tried. They said that we have to work together, but you have to have people who are willing to listen before you can have a conversation. So right now China is in a situation where it's trying to stabilize not only its internal situation, but respond to a very, very uncertain one.
Now, gentlemen, let's hear more from Chairman Wang Yang's concluding remarks. And Chairman of the CPPCC National Committee, Wang Yang, has elaborated on the principles of the political advisory body in the new era. Take a listen.
The CPPCC must work for the people. We should connect with them, listen to their voices, consider their demands, and gather the people's wisdom. We should strive for the approval of people from different sectors.
Well, staying connected to the people, this is what his key point was. And he also mentioned the advisory body's duty is to serve the people. How could improvements be made in this regard, Professor?
The members are coming from the people. The members themselves are ordinary people, representative of the people. You know, when they leave Beijing, when they go back to their ordinary work, they just, they are just the people, and they keep doing their job. You know, keep upgrading their, their technology, keep contributing to the economy. So they represent the people, and their voice actually are not their own. Their voice, their idea, their proposals are actually, all these kind of ideas generated by them, but from the people's will. For example, I noticed that some of the members promoted to, reduce the time of the, reduce the time that being put to the game by the junior, by the youth. So I actually noticed that this is all the social issue, and this is a good example of the CPPCC are actually representing the people, concerning about the interest of the people.
Yeah, but this is the last session of the 13th CPPCC National Committee, and then next year we'll be seeing new members, new advisors walking into the Great Hall of the People with their new proposals. But the question is, how could the 13 CPPCC advisors follow through all their proposals and see it through to the end, the implementation process?
Some of the social issues remain, some of the kind of the political issues remain, and some of the proposals are actually kept being promoted or kept being, let's say, proposed by the different generations of the members. We've noticed that these members are elected and re-elected for more than one session, for more than one, let's say, time, and they can continue talking about their question. They can continue represent the people's will, and they can continue propose that their proposal that haven't been passed or ratified by this session. So I would like to argue that when we talk about the political change, the political transformation, we also should pay attention to the political continuity, not only in some kind of institution, but also in some kind of a policy agenda. And this is the characteristics of Chinese politics.
And Professor, I think we should not overlook on a crucial technicality here. Governments at all different levels in China are obliged to respond to proposals made by political advisors. Tell us more about this procedure.
Yeah, the mechanism. The mechanism here is like this. Although CPPCC is not a lawmaking kind of organ, and their regulation or their proposal might not be, let's say, compulsory to the government to respond. The government has to respond. I've been noticing that the education department, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of the Environment Protection, they respond to the members' kind of inquiry and investigation in a very serious way. They write down their plan how to solve the problem, and they write down their plan to investigate the real detail of the issue, and they really kind of do this kind of plan. So that's the kind of daily job of the government. The executive, the organs. So this is the two-way interaction between the CPPCC and the administration or the executive. And this is also how politics should be run in China.
Yeah, the closing speech is also forward-looking. And on the advisory body's future work, Wang says the consultation quality must be improved.
The CPPCC is a special consultative body, and its role depends on the level of consultation. The more complex the situation is, the more difficult the task is. The more diverse the ideas are, the more crucial it is to improve the level of consultation in order to collect wisdom, seek good advice, and reach consensus. Since the 18th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, the CPPCC has actively explored new ways of realizing and practicing consultative democracy, showing a new outlook.
Well, Chairman Wang Yang talked about reaching consensus. We know that members are from different walks of life. They have solid different backgrounds in their professions. How can they possibly reach consensus during their discussion? And when there are conflict of interest or they have different ideas, what do they do exactly?
Well, it's discussed. They discuss it amongst themselves, and there's a voting process to say, yes, we were going to include this, we're not going to include it. But remember, these are not full-time legislators. What they are is they're bringing forth the issues that are important to their areas, to the areas they represent, not only physical areas. So that has to be harmonized, and this is what I was talking about earlier. Their suggestions go directly to the government. Not all suggestions are going to be taken forward, but then some of them are, and there are reporting. And then what you see here is every year they have to respond. There's a formal report. They went through in the very beginning. We got so many request suggestions. We processed these. We've took up these. We've made progress on these. And that is exactly the mechanism that my colleague was talking about. This is not something which gets buried in the back room and no one talks about it. They have to respond. And this is how you deal with it. If you put, many of these members have been putting forward the same ideas, all right, and saying, look, we have to do something about it. But it's up to the government to figure out and harmonize how all of these different, as you said, competing views and priorities, how they can be harmonized into an overall plan. And that's where the discipline comes in. You can't just say, my issue and everyone else's issue I don't care about. You see that happening too much in democratic societies where they say, I only care about one issue. You cannot care just about one issue. You have to care about society.
Mr. Tang, let me add one detail to our earlier discussion. At the closing ceremony of the CPPCC session, I noticed a hearing impaired political advisor was making a sign language. Yes, and we know that the Beijing Winter Paralympics is now underway. Tell us a little bit more about this specific regard, how political advisors are helping China's physically challenged.
Well, it's not just physically challenged. That's what my point is, that there are so many needs within a society. I mean, 20 years ago, you didn't have these things. You didn't have sign language interpreters or anything like this. I used to see, signs, crippled people half price. But there was no way to get in. I mean, they had steps instead of, ramps where, people could either walk up or use their wheelchairs. Today, that's changed. And it's a gradual process. They say, okay, new designs for buildings must be handicap accessible. And especially in China, I've noticed there are kind of like random steps in different places. But increasingly, when you go to a new building now, they go away. So the same thing with almost all. I mean, I went to a school in Xinjiang, which was for autistic children. Autism wasn't recognized 20 years ago. People had no idea what it meant. They just said, oh, the child's off and there's nothing we can do if I just treat him nicely and hopefully his brothers and sisters will take care of them. Today, they recognize it and they're doing something. They're providing free services, because this is a very special area, not only to the children but their families, so that they can understand and they can make progress. What China is trying to do is make sure that no one is left behind, all right? That there is. It's not just poverty. It's also about special needs.
And recognizing the different needs of different groups of people is also a very unique representation of the CPPCC.
Right. I would like to talk about, get back to the point of the consensus making or consensus reaching. Actually, this is related to our different understanding of politics, right? I know you were in the Senate. You can
No, not the Senate. I was in politics.
Politics. Okay, yeah, politics. Okay, so that's the different understanding of politics. We noticed that the English word politics, is the same in single form and the plural form. But in Chinese, we don't have a clear difference between single form and the plural form. So why does this word has only single form and the plural form in the same way? Because politics originally in the first place represent diversity, represent multiple things, represent the plural thing. So when Aristotle wrote politics in 550 BC, he actually described the different regimes. He described the diversity in his own the world. And well, that's the first step. The first step is that people work in politics should recognize and appreciate the diversity. However, that's the only first step. If you want to get things done, if you want to get policies implemented, you should reach consensus, and consensus does not come naturally. Consensus should be constructed, should be negotiated, should be, let's say, consulted. So that is why the contribution of China's People's Political Conferences to this whole process democracy, to Chinese people's understanding of politics, of how politics should be run.
Yeah.
And talking about getting things down, let's go to China's economic development plan for this year. And the country has unveiled a series of economic targets for the year 2022, including a GDP growth, employment rate, and foreign trade.
Yes, and CGTN's Gao Ang discussed that with Justin Yifu Lin, a member of the Standing Committee of the country's top political advisory body. Take a listen to this.
China has set its economic growth target for this year at 5.5%. What's behind the figure?
Compared to the global economic situations, I think that 5.5% is a realistic and relatively high growth rate. And I do have confidence that China will be able to achieve the growth target. The goal is around 5.5, and very likely at the end of the year, the growth rate may be higher than 5.5%. Certainly, there's some uncertainty, like the pandemic, and also the geopolitical risks and so on. But overall, China is a large economy. As long as we can do our things right, depends on domestic demand, including investment consumption. China should be able to deliver reasonably good growth performance.
What's the key to China achieving 5.5% GDP growth this year?
I think the driving forces, number one, China has a lot of growth potentials in terms of technological innovation, industrial upgrading, because China is still on the process of catching up. And also in the new economy, like in 5G, like the big data. And so all those conditions mean China has good potential for technological innovation and industrial upgrading.
So we know that Justin Lin is not only a political advisor in China, he was the former chief economist for the World Bank. Now he sounds quite optimistic about China achieving this goal of GDP growth around 5.5%. What do you make of this target, Mr. Tangen?
Well, China has always overachieved, but under targeted. What was the target last year? 6%? It was 8.1%. So China tends to err on the side of caution. They don't want to be skirting the line. That unlike a lot of other countries, which are boasting about what they're going to do and then end up, with egg on their face because they didn't achieve it. So in terms of China, it's very, very different from the rest of the world. China has more tools in the economic toolbox. If you start looking at the US and Europe, they always talk about the central bank. Every time it's about the central bank and how central bank can move an interest rate up and down, and that's supposed to make the economy constrict or expand. It's not that easy. China has the direct tools, monetary, fiscal, and also with the SOEs and the economy and the command over it, they can say, look, this is what we're going to do. Now, what's really behind this is the dual track economy. Strategy, I should say. China is it's going to concentrate on what it can control, and that's its internal environment. And by keeping it stable, in a time of uncertainty, you're going to see a lot of capital, as you already have, flowing into China because they want to invest in an economy that's actually working. So there's going to be money to expand, and there's going to be a market. Now, outside, in terms of things, you saw they went from 0.9% CPI this year to forecasting that it was going to be at 3%. All right, that means that they know inflation is going to hit China, not because of China's fault, just because of the world situation. Also, in unemployment. They had said, look, last year it was 5.1, now they're targeting 5.5. This means it's going to be a tough year. It doesn't mean that the government's going to give up. Actually, they have overperformed in terms of the number of jobs created year after year. So it's another area where they set the target lower and they achieve higher. So China's saying this is going to be a difficult year, but we have what it takes to make sure to manage the economy, to keep it stable. And there are a lot of things that I think are going to be very important. I still believe this digital yuan is going to be a game changer for China, akin to the petrodollar in 1973.
In what sense? Could you elaborate on that?
Everything that the internet has brought to us is about information and efficiency. All right. If you look at the processes that can now be performed on the internet and things like that, or because of technology. The EUN will reduce the costs of transactions dramatically, and I mean really dramatically, from 2 or 3% for commercial transactions between consumer to business. That can be from 2 to 3%. This will be 0.2%. All right, or even lower in certain cases. So the cost of doing it, what does that do? That puts more money in people's pocket. They can make more choices. It is not about the transaction costs. You can actually have more disposable income. So this is very important, and it drives a whole suite of services that haven't been before. Remember, the digital yuan depends on 5G, big data. I mean, and the speed of communication, and sensors, knowing what's going on. By having those kinds of controls, the Chinese government is going to be much more efficient in collecting revenue. You can tax at the point of transaction. You don't have to wait to reconcile. You don't have to have thousands of millions of accountants trying to figure out what they owe and don't owe. It's automatic. It happens. All right, and the same thing in terms of the transactions, especially between small and medium-sized enterprises. Just think, when you start cutting their transaction costs and increasing their ability to get to different markets easily, all right, it's huge change here. You take that with RCEP, the Belt and Road Initiative, and all of a sudden you have a completely different economic model that is more efficient. And the one thing we know about money is it follows its own logic, and efficiency is one of the rules.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aina Tangen and Professor Xia Lu. Thank you.
Well, as we mentioned right there, China's economy remains to be one of the most stable major economy in the world, despite all the challenges and risks. Now, with that, we come to the end of today's special coverage of the closing session of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. Now, I'd like to thank our guests, Professor Xia Lu from the Renmin University of China and independent political and economic affairs commentator, Mr. Aina Tangen. Thank you so much for staying with us throughout the hours.
And tomorrow, that's Friday, we bring you more live coverage as legislators conclude their annual session at the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. Chinese Premier Li Keqiang will meet the press afterwards. Do stay tuned for my colleague Li Dongning, who will bring you the latest updates on major stories making headlines around the world.
Thanks for tuning in. See you soon.
Stay tuned.